In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Loving and merciful Father, we thank you for your goodness, for your compassion, for your infinite tenderness. We thank you for loving us so much and so deeply. And like little children confident in you, we ask you to touch our hearts today and to open them to your teaching and your guiding, to the tenderness of your voice and the tenderness of your touch, that you may speak and act during this time the way that you desire to speak and to act. And that we may have the wisdom and the understanding that is given only to the childlike of heart, allowing you to live in us and us to live in you, in the joy of an enduring intimacy. Through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Sorry, Mary, I didn't pray to you today. Mary, pray for us. There we go.
She's happy. You would miss her son.
That's right, we did indeed. She was there praying with us.
Amen.
And we've spent, 23 classes talking about her. And so we changed today to, you see the handout, a meditation on Givenness by John Paul II. This is probably my favorite single piece that he has written. Of course, I haven't read everything he's written by any means. But I think it's also one of his most personal pieces that really reveals his own heart. He wrote it in 1994, shortly after the Synod on the Family, in which his official document was, I don't remember if it's the right one, Familiaris Consortio, that may be wrong. I think it is wrong. But so anyway, he wrote an official document on the Synod talking about the family, but then he had his own reflections on the meaning of human sexuality and the way that man and woman relate to one another, as well as many other themes that are very personal to his own life and his own heart that he expressed in this document. But it wasn't published because it was so personal until 2006, which is after he died. So obviously they had a reason not to share it. And I think it's not tremendously personal, but I think you'll see why they waited as we continue to read it. And just a note before we read on the term givenness. Obviously givenness is a kind of philosophical word. You don't use that in common day speech. What it means is that, well, it's the quality of something being given, put it that way. And so my whole existence in this world, the existence of each one of us in this world, is something that's been given. That is, I've received it as a gift from God. And so the true nature of reality, the true nature of my life, is a gift. And so the fundamental attitude with which I am to live my life is a grateful receptivity to the gift. And when I do that, when I receive the gift, it automatically awakens within me the capacity to give myself in response to the gift that I have received. So there's a receptivity to gift, there's a reciprocal gift, and then within this movement there is born what you could call responsibility. And the term John Paul II uses to describe the context of responsibility is entrustment. Of course, we've talked about entrustment to Mary. And so a big theme of this meditation is how God entrusts one person to another. Whether it be God entrusts a wife to her husband, or a daughter to her father, or a woman to her spiritual director, priest, or a friend to her other friend. Right? There's all these dynamics in our relationships in which God entrusts one person to another and asks them to care for that person. Right? And this is a particular incarnation of the reality of of being itself, which is a gift. Right? As I am a gift, my whole existence is a gift of God. And my fundamental attitude is to receive this gift and give myself in response. But the most intense expression of this gift is whenever I receive the gift of another person entrusted to me. So I receive them as one who's been placed within my care. And then I give myself to them in return to seek their authentic good and to care for them. And it's precisely in doing this that I realize who I am. I experience the full truth of who I am as a human being, which is someone who's been created to receive and to give love and to enter into intimacy. And so this reality of givenness is realized most profoundly precisely in interpersonal human relationships, as well as, of course, in our relationship with God, which is the deepest interpersonal relationship. So that's the big picture about what he's doing here, and there's a lot of practical points. And of course, everything I've said, I will go deeper in it also. But that's kind of the setting for what we're going to read. And it's not too long, but it's long enough, hopefully, to last us maybe a month. Maybe, at least, I think classes start September 15th, so we'll see. We're just going to take it however quickly it goes. And if we run out, we'll find something else. Otherwise, we'll just keep doing this until classes start in September. Okay, so let's read. Sorry, you're going to hear the paper on the recording. Actually, I'm going to, so it doesn't make so much noise. I have it in an appendix to my novel, and it'll make less noise. Okay. Can one man say to another, God has given you to me? As a young priest, I once heard my spiritual director say to me, perhaps God wills to give that person to you. These were words of encouragement, urging me to trust God and accept the gift one person becomes for another. I suspect it didn't immediately dawn on me that these words also hide a profound truth about God, man, and the world. The world, the very world in which we live, the human world, is the setting of an ongoing exchange of gifts. Gifts given and received in many different ways. People live not only alongside one another, but also in manifold relationships. They live for each other. Relating to one another, they are brothers and sisters, wives and husbands, friends, teachers, students. It may seem that there is nothing extraordinary in this. It is just the normal pattern of human life. In certain places, this pattern intensifies, and it is there, at those points of intensification, that this gift of one person for another becomes most real. Okay, so let me explain what he's doing here so that we're all on the same page, or the same paragraph. So, first of all, he's recalling an incident when he was a young priest, talking to his spiritual director, and there was some person in his life, and I'm almost certain it was a woman. You'll learn why I say that later on. And his spiritual director was saying, well, perhaps God is entrusting her to you, giving her to you. And this was an encouragement from his spiritual director to him. It's like, okay, so you're being asked to care for her. Right? And so this was what he calls an intensification of this continuous exchange of gifts that takes place in human life, in which God entrusts two hearts to one another in a particular way so that this mutual giving becomes intense, for lack of a better word. I know I just used the same word, but so that's what he's doing. And so John Paul II said, in this particular instance with this person that God was giving to me, and the encouragement I received from my spiritual director, it opened my eyes to realize that I was learning a lesson that is true in all of human life. Right? How does he put it? He says, these words hide a profound truth about God, man, and the world. So this concrete incarnation of this relationship with whoever it may have been taught him something, showed him something about reality itself. And that's what I already tried to describe. This reality is a gift, and an exchange of gifts and mutual acceptance, and self-giving. Right? The world is the setting of an ongoing exchange of gifts, given and received in many ways, in all the different relationships. Wives, husbands, teachers, students, parents, spiritual director, all of these things. And he says it may just seem ordinary, like that's just the way things are.
I was thinking even in the air we breathe,
Exactly.
the oxygen, the carbon dioxide, the gift, the
Mhm.
gift.
Yeah, it's a continual inhalation and exhalation. Our whole life is. Absolutely.
And the last word, you read real.
Mm-hmm.
I read a reflection on the readings this morning. It was called real presence. Of course, we use that term for the Eucharist.
Right.
And I mean, that certainly was part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Using Martha, Mary, and Abraham, and the 3 visitors and all. But it's kind of what he's written here.
Absolutely.
You had, maybe it was a brief one with Abraham and the 3 visitors until the next year, but it was real because it was hospitality.
Mm-hmm.
It was just an elaboration of what he's saying here.
You're absolutely right. I mean,
What I read.
I think we know whenever we experience real presence and whenever we don't. And sometimes we can go to somebody wanting to really talk to them, but they're not on the same wavelength. They're not really listening, right? That's not real presence. But then there's the times when there's real hospitality, not only of the home but of the heart. Whenever somebody opens their heart and really welcomes you and cares for you as a person. Those are moments when whenever you're aware that that person is being given to you, even if for only a moment, or even if for a lifetime, right? Is you have the heart open to give them the real presence of your attentiveness and your love. And that's whenever that exchange of gifts happens, and each person is enriched. So when he says it may seem that there's nothing extraordinary, he means the opposite, that it is extraordinary. This way that we live in continual mutual self-giving with one another is something extraordinary, even if we feel like, it's just the most ordinary thing, it happens all the time. But, just like I've talked about with Inscape, remember that every concrete created thing is like a sacrament of God's presence. And so I can easily just pass over the surface of things, like skimming the water. But there's a whole ocean underneath if I'm able to be fully present, really present to this moment and to God in this moment, to this moment and the other person in this moment. When I do that, there's this profound opening up of the interior mystery within. And so in a sense, you can say this is a meditation on the inscape present in human relationships. And you haven't heard the term inscape before, have you? So it was termed by Gerard Manley Hopkins, the famous Jesuit poet, and he said there's a kind of bounded infinity in every created thing. That means created things are bounded because they're limited. Like we've talked about dove when I used the example of Inscape before. A dove is a dove and nothing else. It's not infinite. It's a very confined reality. But when I really contemplate the meaning of a dove, I'm making contact with something that's bigger than a dove. I'm God's creative action, which imagined a dove into being and willed it to be. And so when I reflect on the beauty of a dove, there's something bounded, but at the same time it's like it's open to infinity.
That makes sense.
Right.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, paragraph 2. When 2 people join with one another, not only do they give themselves to each other, but God also gives them to one another. In this, God's creative plan is enacted. Okay, let me just explain. So, when 2 people join with one another, not only do they give themselves, that's not like, I'd really like to be Angela's friend. And Angela, will you want to be my friend? Hopefully. So now Angela and I are friends because we gave ourselves to each other. But if we stop there, something essential is missing. Right? Saying God gives us to each other. That is, whenever I met Angela, God was giving her to me. And whenever Angela met me, God was giving me to her. And so God was present.
Because of Trinitarian.
Mm-hmm. Right. God was incorporating us into the relationships of the persons of the Trinity. And so from all eternity, he willed it, Angela and I would know each other. And so there was this kind of mutual gifting that took place. And so we didn't begin it. We didn't initiate it on our own willpower. Rather, we found ourselves already within it. And all we had to do was say yes. And that's what he means. As we read in Genesis, God created the visible world for man, told him to subdue it, and subjected the whole world of lower creatures to man's dominion. However, his dominion over the created world must take account of the good of individual creatures. The book of Genesis reminds us that God saw that all creation was good. Creation is a good for man so long as man is good for the creatures around him, the animals, the plants, as well as inanimate creation. If man is good to them, if he refrains from unnecessary damage or thoughtless exploitation, then this creation forms a natural environment for him. Creatures become his friends. They enable him not only to survive, but also to find himself. So I'm glad that we're reading this together, because something with John Paul II is his thought is very intuitive. So like if you read Pope Benedict or Joseph Ratzinger, his works, his thought is very rational. It's very intuitive, but he weaves his intuitions into a fabric of reason. And so it's very easy to follow. Like you can read 200 pages and you follow like every single step he makes. And he walks you through it. John Paul II is like a flash of light here, a flash of light there. And you're like, okay, where are we going? And so, because he was talking about, there's these intense human relationships, and then all of a sudden he starts talking about creation. So this is why it's sometimes hard to follow. And so I want to kind of pull the intuition together and try to thread it together into kind of a fabric that makes sense about, at least insofar as I can see, what he's thinking through. And this really helps because this meditation itself is deeply embedded in the theology of the body. Every page of it is rooted in the theology of the body. So what he's doing now really is stepping back to Genesis. He quoted Genesis, which provides the whole context in which he fashions the theology of the body. And I've talked quite a bit about theology of the body in every single one of my classes, so hopefully you'll be able to kind of grasp the context. So the reason John Paul II, he introduces the topic of human relationships and giving one person to another, but then he takes a step back because he's going back to build from the ground up. And if you remember in the theology of the body, as I spoke about, the fundamental human experience is not interpersonal human relationship, but original solitude. Do you remember that? If not, it's okay. So when God creates, he creates one person. When God creates human beings, he creates Adam alone. And Adam's first experience of the world is not Eve. His first experience of the world is the animal and the inanimate creation. And through relating to that creation, he realizes creation is a gift entrusted into my care and my dominion. And whenever I relate to this creation in authentic care and stewardship, not only does creation become my friend, but I also, in a certain sense, find myself. As I learn what it means to be a gift. And that happens primarily through playfulness, the joy of experiencing and contemplating the beauty of reality. And it also happens through work. Is we discover ourselves through creative activity. And it's the playfulness that gives birth to the creative activity. I've talked about that before. Whenever I contemplate the beauty of the real, then I'm able to be impregnated by it and then to bring forth into being something that didn't exist before. Whether that's a house, or a work of art, or another human being. Right? And in doing those things, there's also a kind of self-discovery. Because I discover my own self as one who receives and gives in love. I discover myself as a living relationship with the other. which is what I am. I'm not an isolated, enclosed subject that doesn't need anybody else. I'm a living relationship. You know, as I said, in the relationship between mother and child, the child can't discover her own I, her own me, unless that me is awakened by the you of the mother. By the loving gaze and smile of the mother, the child awakens to who the child is. I'm the one who's loved by you, and I'm the one who loves you in return. That's when the child really experiences, okay, I know what it means to be me, to be a person, to be a living relationship with the other. And that also happens to a lesser degree, but in a real degree, in our relationships, even with non-personal things, as Adam experiences in his original solitude. He encounters a world around him, and he recognizes that the world is like him, but it's also unlike him. He realizes, okay, I'm something different. The world's been entrusted to me, but I'm beyond the world. And so he discovers himself in relationship with the world, but the world itself impels him towards God. And so he discovers himself truly in relation to the thou, the you of God. Adam realizes, I am me because I'm in relationship with thou. And that's the foundation of Adam's identity as beloved son. And so original solitude really does not mean I'm alone. Original solitude means I'm alone before God. Nobody else can stand in my place but me, because his love for me is utterly exclusive and unique. He loves nobody else in the whole history of the universe the way he loves me. And so to live in the truth of my original solitude is to live in the truth of my identity in God's loving gaze. So that's original solitude. And that's, in part at least, what John Paul II is drawing on in this meditation, is his earlier meditations on original solitude. And then he's going to begin talking, as he does in the Theology of the Body, on the other two experiences. And let me just remind you or tell you what they are. So original solitude becomes original nakedness and original unity. That is, God brings forth a woman from the man, and he beholds her in a mutual nakedness, that is vulnerability, it's another name, in which they allow themselves to be given to one another by God. And they cooperate with that mutual giving, and they become one. Original unity. And this is the most intense expression of what it means to be a person, an I before thou, before God, incarnate within the I and the you of human beings. So you could say, to be a person means to live a cruciform existence. Let me explain. That means to have a heart open vertically and horizontally, like the cross. Vertically, I am an I before the thou of God, in complete openness and intimacy, nakedness and unity before God. And yet that reality of my relationship with the Trinity also becomes an incarnation of the love of the Trinity in my human relationships, which is the horizontal. So my I, thou with God becomes a I, you with a human other. That's the gospel. Which of the commandments is the greatest? Well, love God with your whole heart, your whole soul, your whole mind, your whole strength, and your neighbor as yourself, period. Living a cruciform love is the gospel. That's it. Have a heart open to God and open to my brothers and sisters. Receiving his love, giving myself to him in return, so that our mutual self-giving can weave our hearts together as one. And then from that place, with God, opening my heart to receive others and to give myself to them, and to be woven together as one with them. That's it. Everything else in the life of the church, everything else in the whole of the church's teaching, everything else in human existence finds its place within that. That's what gives meaning to everything else. giving and receiving love and being drawn together into intimacy. And John talks about that in his first letter, doesn't he? I'm thinking especially chapter 4, how can you say you love God if you don't also love your brother? You're living the I thou, but you're not living the I you. When you love God and allow yourself to be loved by him, he says you're begotten by God. That means God's life comes to live within you, and you become a child of God, and then your eyes are spontaneously opened to recognize the dignity and beauty of God's life in every person. And so your relationship with the thou of God necessarily will become a relationship with the you of all the people you know in this life. And that's why oftentimes they say it's only one commandment. Because I would say there's two commandments tied together into one, because they are distinct. And yet they're inseparable. Because love can't condition itself to say, okay, I'm open to this person but not to this person. I'm open to God but not to the world. Rather, I'm open. Like Christ is open on the cross. He has no defenses, no protection. I mean, he can't even cover himself with his hands because they're nailed to the cross. He's totally exposed. So all he can do is receive and give. And yet, precisely in that place of the greatest solitude, he weaves together all of humanity in the greatest unity, the greatest intimacy. Precisely because he's receiving and giving love unreservedly. He ties us back together what we have torn. Okay, next paragraph. God, in creating, revealed his glory and gave the whole richness of the created world to man. He gave it to man for him to rejoice in, to rest in it. For the poet Norwood, to rest, to restore, to reset, to renew, to od podziwać, denotes to be conceived anew, to be reconceived. God gave the world to man for him to find God in it, and so also to find himself. I'll stop there. It's because it's very, very rich. So God, in creating, revealed his own glory and gave the whole richness of the created world to man. So we can say that the act of creation is what? It's a gift that God gives to man. That's what he's saying. So when you look out at the stars and the trees, the mountains, the ocean, you can hear, I give this to you. This is my gift to you. Because it is. So God gives all created things to man and woman as a gift for them. And it's a gift that reveals the giver. Right? He revealed his glory through creation. And what's man's response? What does John Paul say? He gave it to man for him to rejoice. Yeah. We'll get there in a second, yes. To rejoice in it, to rest in it, the first sentence. So fundamentally, he gives the world to us not as a task to be accomplished, but as a gift to be played with. The task comes later. Just as I said, responsibility itself is born out of a deeper gift of entrustment. And so the fundamental reason that God gave the world to us is for us to rejoice and to rest. And that's the same in human relationships, right? Going back to that real presence. Is if I'm relating to somebody, for example, I come to somebody with the expectation that they're going to care about me as a person and really shelter my heart. But they approach me like a business transaction, right? And this can happen even in the church. As I go looking for like heart-to-heart communication, and they're like, okay, what do you need? Check, check, check. Okay, thank you, bye. You're like, oh, okay. So one person is living in a task mindset. Well, we just need to work together to get this end result. And the other person is in the mindset of to rejoice and to rest in the reality of interpersonal communion. And of course there's things to do, but they need to flow from that real presence to another person and to the world itself. If we forget how to rest and to contemplate and to play, we forget how to work. That's the gospel for today, isn't it? Martha and Mary. Right? Oftentimes there's a danger in reading that passage to say, well, yeah, you need to spend time with Jesus so you're energized to go work. It's like, oh, no. You need to spend time with Jesus because that's what you were made for. Period. You don't spend time with Jesus in order that. Right? That's like just like me telling Davlin, hey Davlin, let's go have coffee because I'm tired and I need to re-energize. Be like, oh, okay, thank you very much. It's like I don't care about Davlin. I'm just using her.
Using me to.
Exactly. And so, again, it's the primacy of being over doing. The primacy of playfulness over work. The primacy of contemplative rest over activity. In which all of our work, all of our doing, all of our activity can flow forth spontaneously in its authentic beauty. And that's what John Paul II says next, which you're getting to, is he uses that Polish word, because Norwood is a Polish poet. And he says this to conceive or to reconceive. Now where, except like in physical conception, is there a greater image of this being present to one another that brings forth fruit? Right? And I've talked about it before, that in earlier Catholic theology, maybe from like the 1600s through the beginning of the 20th century, there was a focus almost exclusively on the procreative element of the sexual embrace. That was it. I mean, there was more, but the emphasis was only there. And so the emphasis on the unitive element was almost totally absent. And so oftentimes, parents were taught I guess just the particular understanding of Catholic theology at that time, that the sole purpose of sexual union is to bring forth children. And so what happens is then the sexual embrace becomes like a means to an end. You use it. You almost you use each other for the sake of conceiving children. Right? And now procreation is obviously God intended result of the sexual embrace, but it's not the only one. The fundamental expression of the sexual embrace is intimacy. And this is what John Paul II brings out in his teaching, and it's also before him what Dietrich von Hildebrand really propagated. Actually, Dietrich von Hildebrand was revolutionary in the 1920s and 30s. He wrote a number of different books, and he said, no, sexual union has two purposes: union and procreation. And he actually said, I would say it has one end. The end of sexual union is sexual union, intimacy, the intimacy of two persons, period. And that also has the inherent capacity and desire to bear fruit. Right? And this means that if a couple is infertile, they can still have a full expression of their sexuality, because procreation is not necessary for the authentic gift of oneself to another, but though the openness to it is. Right? That's why contraception goes against it, because it's a limitation of the total gift of self. It's saying, I give myself to you totally, accept this. Well, that's a contradiction in terms. Right? I give myself totally to you, except I'm not willing to have this end result follow from our union. And so the fruit springs forth from the union, but it's not the primary end. It's the fruit. Just like you think about an apple tree. The purpose of an apple tree is not to produce apples. The purpose of an apple tree is to be an apple tree. And by the way, it also produces fruit. And so if you try to sterilize the apple tree, you're hindering the apple tree being what it is, but it's still an apple tree. So the end of the apple tree is to live and to be and to grow. And the fruit it brings forth is apples. And so you see how these two are united together, union and procreation. We would say resting and rejoicing and conceiving in John Paul's terms, but there's an order to them. We can't rest and rejoice solely so that we can create. Whether we rest and rejoice in the beauty of creation and in God's love, because that's what we're made for. Just like Mary sits at Jesus' feet, not so that she can therefore serve better. I mean, she does serve better once she sits at Jesus' feet, but she sits at Jesus' feet because he's awesome, right? And in the full sense of the term awesome, that means he awakens a sense of awe and wonder. And that's why Jesus says she's chosen the better part, because it's much more important to sit at his feet and contemplate his beauty than it is to do things for him. And when you sit at his feet and contemplate his beauty, you will conceive, and then you will do the greatest possible thing for him, which is bring his love and his beauty into the world. So you see the order. You rest and contemplate and receive for its own sake, and then it will spontaneously overflow.
My English teacher background, yeah, Mary's chosen the better part.
Uh-huh.
Okay, good, better, best. See, Martha, she had a good part, which is feeding them. Mary had the better, so the best. Is that not a combination of both?
Maybe.
I don't know.
I'd have to.
It's my English.
I actually think the Greek is the good portion.
I don't know Greek, so.
Yeah, I'll look it up and confirm, but I'm pretty sure it's the good portion. So there's not even a comparative. He's just saying she's chosen the good thing.
One of the things Bishop Boone pointed out, I listened to his homilies for the Sunday, and that was a male role to sit at the feet of the teacher. And Mary was taking a male role and sitting at the feet of the teacher, and that was scandalous.
Leave it to
And
Luke
I've never
to
seen
write
it quoted that way, put that way before.
Yeah, may well be. That's beautiful. Okay, so let's get back to odpodziewać. And I looked up how to pronounce that, so that's correct. I don't know Polish. So Norwood says odpodziewać is to rest, to restore, to reset, to renew. Denotes to be conceived anew or to be reconceived. So God gave the world to man for him to find God in it, and so also to find himself, which is what you were saying. That's the reason God gave the world to us. So we may discover God, and in discovering God, who else do we discover? Ourselves. Right? I can't know myself by looking merely at myself. I know myself by looking at God. And when I come to know him, I know myself too, reflected in the light of his own loving gaze. I know myself in relationship with him. Because that's who I am. I am I before thou. And so when I get back in touch with the thou, who stands at the very ground of my existence, I know the I also. It's just like, I'm thinking of a quote from Jacques Philippe. He talks about many women think that they're very plain and unbeautiful, whatever, until a man falls in love with them and tells them that they're beautiful. And then it's almost like through encountering somebody looking at them with love and affirming their beauty, they come to believe that they're beautiful. This is the same reality.
Beauty and the Beast thing, an opposite.
Right. I can't discover my own beauty by looking at myself and saying, you're beautiful, you're beautiful. That's that self-affirmation, which doesn't really work. But when I receive that affirmation from another, it's like they're giving me the gift of myself. And so I discover my beauty because another person sees it first and awakens me to it. And this is, I mean, the fundamental mental illness in our culture. I would say the fundamental mental illness in all of human history is a lack of affirming love. And I talked about this, I think last week or the week before. I talked about emotional deprivation disorder, which is the particular term that Dr. Conrad Bars gives to that. That is, in my early life, in my formative years, even up until like early college, I don't experience somebody looking at me with delight and gratitude for the beauty of the person that I am. Rather, they relate to me either as a burden or a task, or somebody to be trained and fixed and educated only. And so if my parents are too strict and overbearing, what happens is I don't have a deep sense of my own identity, my own worth. And so I'm not able to live from a place of rootedness in who I am in my own beauty and affirm other people. Rather, I'm insecure and I spend my life desperately trying to grasp for other people's affirmation, which I didn't receive. And so some of the most successful businessmen, politicians, movie stars are unaffirmed people who are looking for affirmation through external accomplishments. This happens everywhere in the church and outside of the church. Is when we're unaffirmed, we don't have the capacity to care for people as they are, to empathize with them, because we need them to affirm us first. The beautiful thing is that there's no techniques needed to heal this. All you need is to encounter the affirming love of another person, and it automatically begins to restore you to life again. When you encounter that love, it picks up where you left off. You begin to come to life again and discover who you are in your unique beauty, and then you become an affirmer of other people. And you see the chain reaction. Once I am affirmed, I can affirm others, and then they affirm others, and there's all these people receiving the gifts of themselves through the delight that other people have in their unique beauty. So the most important thing for us to do is every person we encounter to see them as a gift of God given to us, which we are asked to love and to cherish in their unique beauty. And as we do that, we'll be helping God to bring people to life. This was the ultimate...
That's the procreation.
That's the procreation,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And this was Jesus' ministry. Jesus' fundamental ministry wasn't correcting people or teaching people or even physically healing people. His fundamental ministry was receiving and sheltering the heart of every person he encountered and delighting in their unique beauty and identity. That's why he was so attractive to people, because they felt like, oh, he knows me. He cares about me. I'm safe in his embrace. And in that way, he lifts us up and carries us back to the bosom of the Father. Because that's what the Trinity does for all eternity, right? The Father shelters and delights in the unique beauty of the Son, communicating to the Son, you are unspeakably beautiful in my eyes and I love you. So the Son knows his identity as the Father's beloved. And the Son, gazing back on the Father in return, says, Father, you are unspeakably beautiful in my eyes and I love you. So there's this embrace of intimacy in the beauty of each. And then there's the procreation, and the Spirit comes forth from their love, and the Father and the Son look upon the Spirit and say together in harmony, you are so unspeakably beautiful in our eyes and we love you. That's the Trinity. And when we live our lives in this sheltering way, we're mirroring and incarnating the life of the Trinity in our human relationships. So that's what we're asked to say to every person God entrusts to us. You're unspeakably beautiful in my eyes, and I love you. It really is that simple.
Yeah, the problem is that the world gets in the way.
The world gets in the way very easily. And oftentimes...
And there's a sacrament, like one time my counselor taught me, there's the sacrament of the dust. And then you shake the dust. You shake the dust from your feet and go back another day. But, you know,
Right.
the sacrament of the shaking the dust off your feet. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is not a technique that we use to fix people. And that's the thing, is you can't force this. So if you're looking at somebody saying, man, you're disgusting, I really don't want to spend time with you right now, and you're like, but you're beautiful and I love you. It's not going to work. Right? I mean, oftentimes you can have a certain struggle with somebody, and yet the deeper love of your heart can come out anyway. And they may experience both, it just may take more time to stick with it and say, yeah, I'm struggling right now, but do you see that I'm loving you deeper through the brokenness to touch the beauty within you? But the important thing is to continue to look and to allow that person's true beauty to awaken the love in your heart. Because true affirmation is not, like I said, it's not a technique. It can't be forced. They have to see it in your eyes and hear it in your voice and in the whole way in which, in a sense, you hold them in your presence. And that's what gives them the gift of the awareness of their own unique identity, their own beauty. But as both of you are saying, is sometimes even so it doesn't work, because a person may be so wounded that no matter how tender you are with them, they're not going to perceive tenderness. No matter how much you love them or listen to them, they're not going to perceive that you love them or are listening to them. Or they may just not want you to. It makes me think of an email I received talking about, have I talked about the hand image in this class? Maybe not. So in relationships, especially like relationships of any depth or intimacy, so let's talk about a therapist and a client, patient, whatever you want to call them. So both of the persons come into the relationship with a certain hesitation. So the client comes in with a hesitation. Is this person really going to understand me? Are they going to reverence me? Or are they going to hurt me again? And especially people like who are coming in for counseling, everybody really, but especially in this context, you feel very vulnerable and exposed, but precisely your vulnerability and exposure has been hurt in the past. And so you enter in with a great deal of hesitation. And it's like they have their hand out like this in your face. And this hand says two things simultaneously. Stay away. But at the same time, I need you. So it's an invitation and a demand to stay away at the same time. And then for the therapist or the other person who's accompanying this person, they have a hesitation out of reverence and respect for the other person. They're saying, okay, I can't just barge in and like fix this person. I reverence them where they are and I can't push against their boundaries. And so what that means is I accept the hand. So I sit there and look at the hand. And I may spend months or years looking at the hand. But I keep talking past the hand. And then at some point, I can reach out and touch the hand. And they may feel like a violation, and you gotta wait. But sometimes they'll let you touch the hand and then lower it. And then you see their face. And so you've stepped into another level of intimacy. Now you're holding their hand and looking them in the eyes. They may not look in your eyes, but you're looking in theirs, right?
Oh, you're so silly.
Yes.
And oftentimes you stay at that level for a long time, don't you? Is, okay, so now you're allowing me to see you more deeply. You're no longer blocking your true self from me. You're letting yourself be looked at, but you can't look back. And so we just stay here. I look at you and you rest. And then at some point, as they continue to speak, they'll offer little hints that they want you to draw closer. And if you miss those hints, then they're going to pull back a little bit. And this happens. And it hurts because oftentimes they're very, very hurt that you didn't pick up on their hints. And it's like, well, we're limited. Oftentimes we don't pick up on hints. But hopefully if the relationship continues going, they're going to offer more and more hints. And eventually you'll pick up on one or many. And once you respond to those, then you're like, okay, they got it. And it opens up a little bit more vulnerability. And then there comes a point whenever they share something and you respond to it in such a way that what you say touches their unique identity. This person who wrote the email said, it speaks their name. It's like, oh wow, you said my real name. And it's like, so now, no longer am I just holding their hand and looking at them, but I reach across with my other hand and I pluck their heartstrings. And now their heart is vibrating under my touch. You got it. You sensed who I am and you love me there. In that place that for months or years I couldn't let you go to, but now you're there and now you touched me. And what happens? Their eyes lift up and they meet yours. And there's a deep intimacy there. I don't remember what led me there, but it's beautiful, isn't it? Oftentimes it's very difficult to get to that point, and it takes a long time. But as long as you continue to offer your heart sensitively to the other person, and as long as they don't give up, You'll reach there eventually. We just have to overcome the limitations of the person's woundedness that interprets things as a threat when they're not a threat. And also the limitations of the therapist or whoever it may be, that we don't know everything. And we're going to make mistakes. We're going to say things that sound clumsy, or even things that hurt the other person. But then we can apologize, and they can forgive, and we can keep going. And the two hearts draw closer and closer and closer together until there's that moment of, okay, now at last you get it. And when they realize, now at last you get it, what they also realize is, and I understand now, you always wanted to get it. And so that moment of encounter and safety with you casts this light back on the whole of your previous relationship. And you're like, oh, okay, so you've been loving me the whole time. I didn't know it because I felt so threatened by you, but now I see that I was safe all along. And it just took this long to get to the point where I'm really able to experience that you do understand. And for you really to understand, even though the desire was there from the beginning. But it's just even in marriage, isn't it? You know, when we get married, it's not like on the day of our marriage we're one. Rather, we're one in one sense, but that oneness opens up a whole lifetime of becoming one. And so marriage is about two hearts that are very far from each other, coming ever, ever closer together until they can speak one another's name and feel safe doing so. Right? That's the great challenge and gift of marriage. And also of friendship of all kinds, right?
Even in deep friendship, yeah.
Absolutely.
Even in deep friendship, that's what I said, yeah.
Okay, so let's at least finish this. Well, we're almost done. Finish this paragraph. So God gave the world to man for him to find God in it and also to find himself. Nowadays, we often speak of ecology. In other words, concern for the natural environment. The foundational basis for such ecology, however, is the mystery of creation, which is a great and incessant stream of giving all the goods of the cosmos to man. And that's probably the most beautiful definition of creation I've ever heard. Creation is a great and incessant stream of giving from God of all the good things of the cosmos to man. It's much more wordy than what I said earlier, but that means all of creation is God's gift to me. That's what he's saying. All of creation is God's gift to me. Both those goods man encounters directly, as well as those he only discovers through research and experiments utilizing the various methods of science. Man knows more and more about the richness of the cosmos, but at the same time, he sometimes fails to recognize that these come from the hand of the Creator. That's our current world, isn't it? We know a lot more about the cosmos through scientific methods of experimentation, telescopes, microscopes, other scopes, right? But we don't see God through it anymore. It makes me think of the new atheists. I don't know if you've heard of the new atheism. So there's these scientists who are disproving God's existence because they're so smart. But the thing is they've become so scientifically minded that they no longer see creation as what it is, as a gift of God. They see a whole bunch of cells. And so it's like they're seeing the surface, but they're not able to see the mystery that...
They don't see the ocean.
Exactly. Exactly.
All those waves are going to come up with you.
That's right.
Knock them off.
But oftentimes, you know, when I say that because they're so smart, of course, I mean, there's pride in all of us, so that can be an element. But I think oftentimes their scientific learning is a fortress built up to protect their wounded hearts. Right? Atheism doesn't come usually through intellectual reasoning, because authentic intellectual reasoning leads you to God. Rather, it comes from a burdened and wounded heart that no longer feels safe receiving the gift of creation, but feels threatened by it. Threatened by the giver of the gift. It's almost like God and me are in competition, and so in order for me to be free and safe, God can't be part of the picture. So I need to blot out the sky in order to avoid getting sunburned. That's the kind of attitude. Because they feel threatened by the greatest of all things. because they feel like it's in competition with them rather than desiring their authentic good. I mean, one of the most famous of these new atheists describes God as the flying cookie monster that we invented for ourselves in order to console us. And he says he's just as real as a flying cookie monster. You can think about a flying cookie monster, I don't know, some cookie with arms flying in the sky, I don't know. And God's just as real as that. So you see how there's total disconnect with who God really is. God is three persons living in an endless relationship of perfect joy, who out of the abundance of this joy have created a world to manifest their love and want to draw this world back into intimate relationship with themselves. God is pure love, pure beauty, pure goodness, pure relationship. That's not a flying cookie monster. That's the reality that explains everything else. The reality of love and intimacy. And I think if we can present God that way to those people who have been influenced by this new atheism, who begin to think that way because they've read the books or whatever, we can begin to reopen them to the authentic existence of God.
It's that hand thing that you were talking about earlier. You know, it's just touching, just dealing with the hand.
Right.
And then on down.
Yep. And there's a subtle reinterpretation that happens there with the hand, is because what they're afraid of with the hand is that you're going to violently pull the hand away and correct them or even hurt them. But the key is to begin to explain what they're doing with the hand and to allow them to feel it, the circumstances that you're in a different way. Oh, wow, so actually, like, you're not, like, threatening me. It's like, oh, so God is actually not like a flying cookie monster that we just invented, or like a angry taskmaster. He's actually like love, and like he loves me, and then slowly the hand goes down. Right? So it's to reinterpret the reality through the way that you love them and speak with them, so that their defenses can fall and they can experience the real love that God has for them. There's something else I wanted to say about that. Let me see if I can remember. Come on, I wanted to say it. I can't remember. Oh well, it'll come back hopefully. Let me read and see if it jars my memory. However, there are times when all men, even non-believers, glimpse the truth of the givenness of creation and begin to pray, to acknowledge that all is a gift from God. In the book of Genesis, we read that on the last day of creation, God made man and woman, he created them. He created. In this instance, this means, even more profoundly, that God gave them to each other mutually. He gave to man the womanhood of the woman who is of his kind, a helpmate like unto him, and also gave man to the woman. So, since the very beginning, man has been given to the other by God. If we read the text of Genesis carefully, we find in it the very beginning, as it were, of this giving. So let's finish this section real fast. So you see, he's shifting now, again, theology of the body style, from original solitude, man's experience of his aloneness before creation, which is entrusted to him, but at the same time is not enough to fulfill his desires, because it's not a person. And yet he finds God there. Right? He even begins to pray by discovering creation as God's gift. I before thou. Man's original solitude, but now in this paragraph, John Paul II shifts. He says, but in the beginning, God didn't only give man creation, he gave man woman. And he gave woman man. And he makes 2 points. One is Adam sees that woman is the same, and man sees that woman is not the same. He sees that she's the same because she's also a living human being, a living person of his kind, as he says. At the same time, he realizes that she's not the same because she's a different sex. And so there's a difference there that both are opened to be a gift to one another in a unique way. So there's a likeness and a difference. Just like there's a likeness and a difference between the Father and the Son. The Father is not the Son, and the Son is not the Father. There's only one Son in the Trinity. And there's only one Father in the Trinity. And yet their difference doesn't separate them from one another, rather it's precisely their meeting place. Because the Father is the one who gives himself in fatherly love to the Son for all eternity. And the Son's the one who, in childlike trust, receives the gift of the Father for all eternity. And when God creates man and woman and gives them to one another, they're meant to reflect and to incarnate that in their relationship. So you can say the man represents the Father, the woman represents the Son. The man gives, the woman receives, and the woman receives and gives back. So there's this incarnation of the Trinity's love within creation in the relationship between man and woman. And so the woman coming forth from the side of Adam as he sleeps, you could say, is an incarnate image of the eternal begetting of the Son. The outpouring of the Father's heart into another person. Ooh, it's coming back. Come on. Okay, it had something to do with sacred art, but I don't remember it. Okay. If I remember, I'll tell you next week. We need to finish this because we're already past time. So let me read that last paragraph to bring it to a close. Man, as man, feels lonely among creatures that are not of his kind, and as such is confronted by a being who is like unto him, right? The same. In the woman whom he receives from God, he finds a helpmate like himself. We must understand the term helpmate in its most basic meaning. Woman is given to man so that he can understand himself, and reciprocally, man is given to woman for the same end. So why is woman given to man, or man to woman? What does he say? So that they can discover themselves. That is reciprocity, right. I can't discover myself by looking at myself alone in isolation. In order to discover myself, I have to be vulnerable enough to receive and care for another person, and to be cared for by them. So in a sense, man discovers himself in a relationship with woman, and woman discovers herself in a relationship with man, because that's the way that God designed it. They are to mutually affirm, notice the term, they are mutually to affirm each other's humanity, awed by its dual richness. On first beholding created woman, man must surely have thought, God gave you to me. He said as much, though in different words, but he said as much. Awareness of gift and givenness is clearly written into the biblical creation account. For man, woman is first an object of awe and wonder. Notice the primacy. Woman is first of all what? An object of awe and wonder. Isn't that what every woman wants from a man? Mm-hmm. She wants to be a source of awe and wonder for him. And when a man allows himself to feel that for the woman and to express it to her, he's giving her the gift of herself. And yet, as man does it, woman is also giving man the gift of himself. He's realizing himself through loving. And woman is realizing herself through being loved. Woman is first an object of awe and wonder. With her appearance, the world first encounters what Gertrude von Lefort termed the eternal feminine. But for there to be an eternal feminine, that means it has to live for all eternity in God. Which means, and it'll be important later on, the woman represents a profound mystery that's lived in God from all eternity. John Paul II says later in this meditation, she is, I don't remember exact words, an irradiation of God's primordial beauty. That is, every single woman whom God has made is an incarnation of the beauty of God. And man has been given the eyes to see with awe and wonder that beauty that woman represents. And that beauty is entrusted to man as a gift in order to be sheltered and cared for so that the beauty of the woman may be what it is, within the shelter of the man. And the man may find and experience his true being in sheltering and loving the beauty of the woman. That's God's eternal plan, and the way it's incarnated in the love among human persons. And we'll go much, much deeper in that, because like the second half of the meditation is on that entrustment. But I think that's good to kind of get us started. So I went way over, so let's just conclude with the Lord's Prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.